This is SG2 Perspectives, a conversation with industry experts and SG2 thought leaders about the biggest trends in healthcare and what we all expect that's going to mean for the future of healthcare delivery.
Healthcare is a very mission-driven industry, and so there's an opportunity, if we believe, what we think is that if you really want people to change and transform and achieve great things, it's about a lot more than data and technology. It's about connecting with their higher purpose.
Welcome to SG2 Perspectives. I'm your host, Trevor Durin, and today I get to interview Molly, Cate, and Tim Stewart from Jarrard, Phillips, Cate and Hancock, a national top 10 strategic communications firm dedicated to working with healthcare providers through really any moments of change, challenge, or opportunity. Molly's a founding partner and chief innovation officer at Jarrard, and Tim's an associate vice president in the national practice. And I got introduced to Tim and Molly when I was working with my colleague Jennifer O'Connor on a publication around health system strategic planning processes. And to SG2, that's all about the numbers and the data and bringing in diverse inputs from across your system and the processes that the team goes through and the frequency that you update it. But then what happens after that? And that's what we were talking to Tim and Molly about. Great, how do you make it real? How does the leadership team have to communicate it internally and externally? And I found it fascinating. I wanted to sit down with them to learn more. So that's what we're going to do today. But first, because they've both lived in Chicago, I want to bounce a theory off you guys. I think Chicago pizza, not deep dish. Deep dish should have a different name. It should be called like lasagna belly destroyer.
Casserole pizza, maybe something like that.
That's close. We'll workshop it a little bit.
The belly destroyer, I think, is probably not the first area of sales I'd go. But
yeah, we need to bounce it off marketing. But the thin crust cracker, not cut into slices, I don't get it. I'm from New York. Why don't they just make a normal pizza and call it a pizza? I don't get it. I don't like it. It's a problem I have with Chicago. Your thoughts?
I think Molly likes the squares.
I'm 100% committed to deep dish Chicago pizza.
Good.
But not the thin crust square. No, I grew up in the Chicago area. I've had that. I've never understood it because nobody wants the middle pieces.
Right.
Like there's no crust.
No, I love getting cheese and sauce and grease directly on my hands immediately.
Yeah, I think those are the sort of like Cheeto people. People who are really into Cheetos probably like those middle pieces.
Glad we've ironed that out.
Well, we're done here.
I don't know. Where do you go with that?
Easy pivot back to the work that we do together around strategic planning. So at SG2, we talk about the impact of change forecast, which is how we model and quantify trends across the healthcare landscape. You talk about the art of change. So what's the art and how are health system leadership teams tackling this?
Yeah. So the art of change is a concept that we started talking about around the office and with each other as it pertains to how healthcare systems actually make change happen. And let me explain that a little bit. So we, in our work, and I'm sure, your work too, across the country with health systems and even just the healthcare industry as a whole, you hear all this talk about, how broken the system is, how behind we are in technology, how we have to create a more efficient healthcare system that coordinates care and does all of these, links everything from the same technology platform, et cetera. So there's, a lot of talk around the need and the urgency for change in healthcare. And primarily the way that a lot of health systems go about that, or the way that we as an industry collectively have addressed change, is through the use of technology and data. And while we think those things are really important and they're absolutely a piece of the equation, what's not talked about so much is the soft side or the art of change in how change actually happens. So how do you get nurses and physicians to do their jobs differently? How do you get patients to engage with the healthcare system differently? How do you bring new and innovative care models to the market and get people excited about those and trustworthy that this new model is going to be something that they like to pursue for their care? So the concept, Art of Change, really was born from that, from our opinion that data and technology isn't enough, that there also has to be thought put into the persuasion of how people change and the role that communications plays in that. We then turned that into a thought leadership campaign for our company. And it's been a series of stories that we released over the last year and interviews with healthcare leaders and other experts in the industry, talking about how they use the power of communications, the power of mission, the power of connecting with people at a higher purpose in order to really create and accelerate change within their organizations.
And it's available on the internet at aoc.jarrardinc.com.
Why, yes.
Yeah, you can read all that change there. And
We'll link to it in the show notes.
And I do think that we've seen, the concept as it's turned into this publication that we've produced 4 issues of. We've gotten a lot of interest from health system leaders who have participated. We've gotten a lot of great interviews, great feedback from people who are living it. It's all available there. It's really, I think, some of the best work that our firm's done. And I've had very little to do with it.
Sounds like everyone.
Yes. And what we discovered is there's a lot of emphasis, and what we see still is there's a lot of emphasis put on all the things that you were talking about in your intro, the data, the technology, how health systems leverage those things to identify problems and solve them and achieve connectivity and care coordination and all of those types of things. But what we don't see a lot of is how to truly engage with people, with doctors, with nurses, with community members. And we think healthcare is a very mission-driven industry. And so there's an opportunity, if we believe, what we think is that if you really want people to change and transform and achieve great things, it's about a lot more than data and technology. It's about connecting with their higher purpose. Why did they get into healthcare in the first place? What's the impact the organization can have for the future? Where do they want to go? What's the vision? And how do you engage purposely and intentionally with people over time to do that?
I think, you were talking about data, and I think one of the things that we talk about here a lot, and that Molly and our founding partners have known from the beginning, is sort of how uniquely political and emotional healthcare is. It's a different sort of business. If you were to build a healthcare system, you wouldn't build it like this. You wouldn't have what our current healthcare system is, and we have some of the tools. The organizations like SG2 have a ton of the data that shows where we should go, and we're not moving there quickly enough. And part of the reason we're not moving there quickly enough is because it's hard and it's emotional and it's challenging to people who don't view it as a business and didn't get into it to be in a business. And so that tension, that rub between how we deliver care in a way that is more effective and ideally cheaper for people, comes up against people who are in the hospitals, in our health systems, just working because they were called to it, the mission-driven stuff that Molly was talking about, that they're not there to be a part of something that is more efficient or operationalized changes. So how do we tell them a story that fits the mission into where we need to go as an organization? I think that's where smarter people than I at the firm came up with this Art of Change idea. I think it's really a smart way of thinking about how to make the change real for people.
That's well said. I like that. And this really builds on that. Molly, you wrote, I'm going to quote yourself back to you, technology alone isn't going to fix healthcare. People, more precisely, people who understand how and why people change are. Unpack that a little bit for us.
Yeah, I think just to go back a bit, I think, again, there's so much emphasis put on technology and data in healthcare. And really, those things are important and they're sorely lacking in healthcare, but I don't think it's enough. I heard someone say in a fellowship program I was in one time from a big tech company that technology really just identifies your problems faster, but it doesn't solve them. So it brings things to light faster, that need to be fixed, that need to be addressed. But who actually comes up with the solutions, and I would argue more importantly, implements those solutions, are people. And so at the end of the day, healthcare is people delivering care to other people. Mm-hmm. AI has a role increasingly, telehealth plays a role, EMRs play a role, and all of those things. But at the end of the day, we're really talking about one human being caring for another in a very intimate setting, life and death situations, and tapping into people's sense of emotion and mission, I think, is really critical to get them to change in any way, big or small. And if you look at things like politics, how people decide what candidate to vote for, what makes people quit smoking, stop drinking, losing weight, all of those things. You can present them with data. You can get on your scale every day. You can go to your doctor a couple times a year and get your checkup. But if you're going to decide to make major changes for yourself and in your life, that comes from within. And it's an emotional decision, I would argue. Also an emotional decision in large part about who you're going to vote for and how people make decisions. So I think what we're really advocating for here at our firm and what we feel strongly about is there has to be an integration of the data and the technology with this human element and with the human change, and how to bring people to the table that design change campaigns that get people to buy in at an emotional level.
So give me some examples. How have you seen leaders really prepare their organizational culture to manage this change?
Yeah, I can drop a couple things here, but invite Tim to do so as well. So I think a couple techniques that we've seen be really helpful are, number one, to look inside the organization. At health systems, big or small, they're packed full of rich stories about people. And I think our society, from a communications and information absorbing perspective, people are thirsty and hungry for human connection. And we have it in healthcare, particularly in the delivery of healthcare. So we work with the health system in South Florida that went on a patient experience initiative for their organization. And they went to their own nurses and recorded videos and stories about, and with patients, about these sort of life-changing moments of care, or literally life-saving moments of care, and the impact that it made in people's lives. So, that's one way. We've seen people go back to the mission and vision and values. How do you engage with employees and physicians around perhaps redesigning those for the future of healthcare and where your organization is going around that? So I think the power of story, the power of engagement are both factors that we've seen, be really impactful over time.
Yeah, I also think so. There's a couple different families of communication. We'll talk with leaders or board members or whatever, and say how well is your strategy known throughout the system? What do your employees know? They'll go, we drown them in communication. They get everything. They've got the mission, vision, values. They're everywhere. We talk about where we're going in the newsletters we send all the time. And so there's that family of communication that is like CYA communication. You're like, you can search your email for it because we sent it to you. You have it somewhere. And then it's like, what do you actually want people to know? And that's harder. And that takes more effort from leaders throughout the organization. So I think people who are successful at it do a good job of putting it in context and recognizing that giving people that context is part of their job as leaders in a health system. I think the whole healthcare system has changed dramatically, even in the last 10 years, 10, 12 years since I got into healthcare. It's going to change dramatically going forward. So putting things in context not only lets people know why we're changing things today, but also reminds them that it's not 1985 and that this is a different industry than it was then. And a lot of our employees have been around for a long time. A lot of our physicians have been around for a long time and have practiced a lot of different ways. And so if you're not going to socialize that change through sincere efforts at open communication, then people aren't going to know what they're a part of. They're going to feel disoriented by mergers and acquisitions. They're going to feel disoriented by new demands on metrics they're supposed to hit. And they're going to feel disconnected from the organization that they wanted to join in the first place.
To piggyback on what Tim's saying, the word that is going through my mind as you talk is authenticity. And we've written a lot about that in Art of Change, and also think that's a piece of healthcare and communication that's sorely missing. Frankly, we talk a lot in healthcare about the urgency around the need to change, the critical nature of it, all the things that are wrong with the system or, with the health system or with healthcare industry in general. And we know there's lots of those. But really engaging with people in an authentic way is a lot different than that. I think to unpack that, it's a couple things. It's listening, like actively listening to your employees and your physicians to know where they're at. So you can't develop a compelling message or launch get people engaged in working toward a strategic vision until you know where they're at. So you have to meet people where they're at. You have to know what keeps them up at night, what's at the top of their mind. what's not important to them. What do they need to do their jobs better? We interviewed Larry Antonucci, who's the CEO, Dr. Larry Antonucci, who's the CEO of Lee Health for The Art of Change. And he said a lot of times, your people that are on the front lines, they have the best ideas for the solution because they're the closest to the problem. But how often, and I would challenge everyone that's listening to this podcast, how often do you really get to know what's in the hearts and minds of your frontline employees? I mean, not a lot is my guess. It's complex. It's hard work running a health system. And that seems sometimes like a luxury that people just don't have. I think we would argue that it's really important, though, in understanding where people are. So that's sort of one thought that comes to mind in terms of authenticity.
Another piece of that,
listening.
I'm sorry, was that, and also in those conversations with the people on the front line, your frontline employees aren't reading modern healthcare. Like they're not, your physicians are not federal policy experts. They don't have, I think we sometimes take for granted the context that the decisions that we are making that guide the decisions that we are making rather. And people don't know that. And those are the people who are looking to you for leadership. So through those conversations, through that active listening process, you'll also hear what their concerns are, what's driving them in a way that is probably different than what you're imagining drives the health system forward. And so finding that in between, finding the area where the organizational goals meet the personal goals, that's the job of leaders.
Yes. And I would say to add on to that, to think about it in two bookends. So when you talk about big change with employees and with doctors, there are two things, well, really all humans. I think there are two immediate things that happen. They think about the big picture, what is the collective impact? This is big, et cetera. And then it immediately goes to, what about me? What about my job? How's this going to impact me? What do I need to do differently every day? Do I need to do something differently every day? And so answering both of those questions to boil it down to something really tactical here for listeners, I think is really critical. Employees have to know, and doctors and your community members have to know, how does this tie to our vision? How is it going to make us a better organization? How's it going to better position us? What's the impact we're going to have together? And then almost immediately, well, what is the impact on you? So how do you take it down to that level? I think is critical to success.
It made me think of when I was in high school. I remember I wrote a paper and I said at one point in the paper, I said, we as humans hate change. And the teacher wrote something in the margin like, as opposed to what, like donkeys? And I thought that was kind of a jerk move, but it really stuck with me. Yeah.
They made the necessary impact, though, as a teacher. Yeah.
Did they like Cheetos?
Yeah. Yeah.
They might be in that same category. Yeah. What are some best practices that you've seen from healthcare leaders when they're communicating really tough messages, both internally and externally? I mean, I'm thinking about that. I just spent time, and I often spend time with smaller independent hospitals serving smaller markets where the local community really feels a deep connection to those hospitals as a pillar. And how do you manage both internal and external tough messages?
Well, I think it starts with building structures internally to effectively communicate. And so some of that is that the CEO or the board chair is not going to be able to communicate one-on-one with every person in the health system. So what have you done to build those pathways for communications? I think a lot of times we run into health systems that we work with that take it for granted that nurse managers or directors are carrying the message forward. And we say, well, how are they doing that? What have they been trained to do? What are they? And it's like, well, they know what they're supposed to tell their nurses. And so making sure that we have effective feedback pathways up and down the organization so that the message from the CEO can be heard by the C-suite, can be distributed down through the ranks in a way that everyone is authentically, to borrow from Molly, communicating with their people in a way that speaks to them, I think is a big part of it. You can't wait for the big announcement. You can't wait for the big announcement and the press conference and then expect that everyone internally is going to be aligned. It works the same way externally, but you have to build those relationships now because you're going to have a big announcement. You're going to have a big change. So starting now to build those relationships in the public with the key stakeholders, with community groups that are important, with the Rotary Club, whoever it is in your town, building those relationships, making yourself visible now will buy you a lot of goodwill when the time comes.
Could not agree more. And that is one thing we talk a lot about here and is woven into every aspect of what we do. And that's the power of relationships, which I would argue are a bit of a lost art as well today. And so, in addition to the change management work that we're talking about today, we do a lot of crisis communications work. And I have seen leaders emerge from, situations that seemingly would be beyond repair for a healthcare organization. But if they have those strong relationships already, to be able to leverage those during the right time is the most important thing that I think a health system has. And
we've seen the opposite too.
Yes.
We've seen leaders who encounter things that should be survivable, who have not built up the goodwill internally or externally to survive them, on a job level. So I think it cuts both ways. We've seen it work really well and we've seen it work really poorly. And the difference has been relationships and that consistent effort with the people that matter.
Yeah. And so to kind of bring it to this topic that we're talking about for SG2, maybe there's a health system that has this new strategic plan that is going to trigger a lot of really big changes for that organization around the way care is delivered, where care is delivered. Are we going to move services around? Are there facilities that need to be minimized or perhaps closed, et cetera? Are there changes on how physicians are going to have to be compensated? All the things that you can kind of unpack from a strategic plan. So that's the type of thing, just to bring it home here, that if people don't know what you're about, if they don't know how long you've been investing in the community and that you're studying the needs of the community, the healthcare needs, everything that a health system needs to know as it thinks about where and how to deliver care and which service lines to deliver at which location, people are going to fall back on what they know about you and your track record. It's just human nature. If doctors don't know what you're committed to as an organization, there's no context for them to put these compensation changes in place of, right? So they're automatically going to assume something not so great, I would argue. So those relationships, what you're known for, what's your track record? Do people understand what guides your organization at a higher purpose and what guides your decision making and what you're committed to from a values perspective and a higher purpose perspective? Those types of things go way and don't get nearly enough airtime, I think, and go a long, long way. We've seen that over and over again here.
The other piece about authenticity is, and I know that kind of us as a strategic communications firm talking about authenticity can seem a little rich. It can seem a little BS-y. And I think that it's important, the way Molly talked about it is not authenticity by talking point or by message discipline. It is really about who are you and what are you trying to do? How are you trying to lead this health system? It's not, the LinkedIn posts that are engineered to get likes. It is about who you are and where we're going together. And I think that that's something that gets lost. People, I said at the beginning, people who are drawn to these jobs are mission driven in healthcare. They need to feel like you're mission driven too. They need to feel like you're committed to their future and to their hospital or their health system. I think we've seen a lot of leadership changes go poorly because people think, okay, well, I've been here 30 years and we had a CEO for 25 and now we've had 4 in the last 5 years. And so people feel that. And if you're coming into one of those jobs, they need to know you. They need to feel like they know you. They need to feel connected to who you are in a real way, not in the we're telling you as a communications firm way.
Yeah. And what's important to them. I mean, I think that's something a lot of health systems don't talk about, but is really a powerful thing. Is it important that we make, what are the the most important sort of values that guide an organization? Because then I know what you're going to fall back on when you're trying to make a tough decision. Is money your motivator? Is mission your motivator? Is it both? Are you trying to grow your health system? Is rural healthcare important to you? What are those things? People will give you a lot of credit and go a long way with you if they understand what guides your organization.
Yeah, I love it.
Yeah, sorry, Trevor, did you want to talk on your own podcast?
That's not my job. No, I just tee it up for the smart people. So change is always going to be uncomfortable for anyone, right? I mean, yeah, value-based care sounds great as long as I'm going to make more money in that world than I do today, sure. So how do good leaders make everyone a little bit uncomfortable in a constructive way?
Uncomfortable transparency. Is that what you're referring to?
Please.
Yes, that's a phrase someone coined around here. So I think a couple of things come to mind for me, and Tim probably has some thoughts as well. But number one is I think about it like on two sides of a coin, or kind of like building an army, I guess might be a better analogy. So you want to think about, what is the source of tension and the challenge that has to be solved? And you can wrap a lot of urgency around that. So painting the need for change or whatever it is, the need for a new strategy, the need for a new strategic plan, the need to do something different. Why is that? And why is it critical that we do it now as an organization? Like really, I don't mean like some new government regulation is coming down the pike or something like that. But really, if we want to evolve our health system for the future, we want to be here another 100 years caring for the community, we want to be able to do these things, we have to position ourselves for success by taking these steps. And here's why, and here's how we're going to do it, et cetera. So a sense of urgency wrapped in a mission, I would say, is one side of it. What is the impact that organization is going to have, and the impact that nurses and physicians can contribute to? To go back to that sense of inherent mission, I think that at a personal level. And then on the flip side, I would say it's to acknowledge that it's going to be hard. And just go ahead and be transparent about that and be real about it. But how are you going to support them in the process? So that could be a number of ways. The way we would think about it would be, how are they going to be able to contribute? Are they going to be able to give feedback? Are we going to engage with them ahead of time, or then just showing up and say, here's what we need to do your job differently, or here's how your compensation is going to change next week? People want to know why as much as they do what, and then they want to figure out how they can shape it. So, is there opportunity in a systematic, enterprise-wide way to be heard? Is there an email where you can ask questions? Are there going to be town halls where we could ask questions? A website where they can get information? Working groups? Like what are the actual ways that you're going to support your workforce, your physicians, your nurses, and ultimately your community, if that's important to you, through change? So, I think to kind of recap, one side is a sense of urgency wrapped in mission. And then the other side, I would say, would be what's the support mechanism and engagement mechanism that people are going to have.
Yeah. And I think that the other piece of it is that people, I think people in leadership roles may underestimate how much their presence matters to the people who work there, and how much their just being visible matters. And it really can be the smallest things. I was with a client recently doing focus groups, and this was not the subject of our focus group, but in every one of the focus group sessions, one of the nurses we were talking to, unbidden, mentioned an email that they had gotten from the CEO last week, and it was some minor issue with parking. But the CEO had led with accountability.
Parking are not minor issues.
That's true. That is actually a really good point. But the CEO had led with, I made a mistake here on this issue. I screwed up. We didn't write this memo. This is not a plug for us. He did it himself. And people were blown away. Again, every focus group, somebody mentioned it, and then it was like a wave through the room where people were like, I just made. And one woman said, I've worked here 39 years. I've never heard a CEO take responsibility for that. This was a really minor, again, not minor because it was parking, but it was a minor communication. It was not like a major sort of threatening the health system issue that required a crisis team or a big response. It was just a simple act of accountability. And the fact of it meant so much to the people who work there. And I think that that's something that when we talk to senior leaders, sometimes it's like, well, I don't have time to round. I don't have time to be out there all the time. It's like, you don't have to be out there all the time. You have to be out there some of the time so that people can see you. And then they can tell the other people in the hospital, the other people they work with, hey, I saw the CEO today. He was just walking through like a normal person, because that's what they're looking for. They're looking for people, connecting to people, the way Molly was talking about before.
I don't know if this is relevant or not, but something came to mind as you were talking. We have this working with the health system who's undergoing a lot of scrutiny around pricing and transparency around costs and all the things that are like really hard to explain and talk about to people that aren't in healthcare, but they're in the limelight, in a significant way, in a public limelight. And their CEO wrote this really, I would say pretty personal editorial in the newspaper about how much capital it takes to run their healthcare system and to do all the things that they've done, which are basically to build a regional health system across this portion of their state. They've saved a lot of rural hospitals that otherwise might not have existed. They've done all the right things. But if you just look at the numbers in isolation, they appear to be a really wealthy organization. And so anyway, he put his personal touch on it, right? And he's not the type of CEO that speaks out a lot about these kind of things. And the outpouring he got from employees, because they wanted to come to his defense and to the health system's defense. They know they work in this complex environment day in and day out where you're trying to do really fabulous things like, care for people in their greatest moments of need and survive all the regulatory changes and advancements in technology in this world that's healthcare. And so I think Tim is right. Being selective but intentional about how you use your personal brand for leaders is really a powerful tool that can be, a little awkward if you're not an extrovert, but I think is really powerful for systems going through change.
Thanks for those stories. That's great. Every time I talk to you guys, I get more hopeful that some of the stuff that we dream up and that the data shows could happen in the future, that we can actually get there. Knowing that there's people working on the really tough stuff and the interpersonal stuff makes me feel better that the industry can get where we're all trying to get it to. So thanks for sharing that today. Appreciate it. That's been
Thank you.
A great episode of SG2 Perspectives. I'm looking forward to talking to you again soon.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
Thanks for having us.
This has been another great episode of SG2 Perspectives, where industry experts and SG2 thought leaders explore the drivers of tomorrow's healthcare strategies to inform today's decision makers. Contact us anytime by sending an email to sg2perspectives@sg2.com. We'd love to hear from you. SG2 revolutionized healthcare demand forecasting with the Impact of Change forecast, and today we're the industry's premier strategy advisory firm. To learn more, visit sg2.com. Thanks so much for listening, and we'll see you again soon.